Editing Becky popping in to say, before I start this video, there is an annoying buzzing sound in this video. Right when I sat down to record it, people started working on something on my street. It was incredibly loud. I even had a microphone and it couldn't drown it out. But I was already set up to film and I wasn't going to waste that opportunity, so sorry for the annoying buzzing sound, but I couldn't do anything about it.
Hello, thank you for stopping on my video. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz. I post videos every 5 days, and if I can manage, I will squeeze some in between, and today I have another recommendation video for you. Before we get started though, could you hit that subscribe button for me if you haven't already? It would really help my channel grow and I would love for you to be here with me. Today I want to share with you some mythology / folklore retellings that are not Greek. I love mythology and folklore retellings. I love to get informed about other countries and civilizations, folklores, and mythologies. This recommendation is inspired by pre-Columbian folklore and mythology, and that is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I absolutely loved this book. It has a lot going on in it. Our main character is Serapio, who is a god vessel. Something very traumatic happened to him at the beginning of this book, and it has left him blind. So he is on his way to Tova for the eclipse when he ends up on the ship with Shiala, who is a shape-shifting siren. They connect, they form a friendship, and once they get to Tova, they encounter the sun priests and priestesses who are trying to stop Serapio from coming into his power. I thought it was really unique. I loved seeing the pre-Columbian indigenous influences within this story, and I think if that's something that appeals to you, you should definitely check it out. The second book wasn't nearly as good for me simply because we weren't following the friendships and relationships that were established in this book, but I am still intrigued to read the third book whenever it comes out just to see how this story all wraps up. The next folklore retelling I have to share with you is a Korean retelling, and that comes from the tale of Shim Cheong. I don't know if I said that right at all. I apologize if I didn't. But that is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. I recently just read this and it kind of matches my hair today. That's cute. This is the story of Mina, whose brother is taking his beloved out on the ship because his beloved has grown up to believe that she is the sea god's sacrifice. She will become the sea god's bride. And when Mina stows away on the ship and she sees that her brother's beloved hesitates in jumping off this ship, she instead sacrifices herself to the sea god to become his bride. And when she enters the underworld, she finds that the sea god is under a spell. He is asleep, and she finds herself connected to this young man named Shin. And through that, they have to work together to try and break the sea god's curse to help the people on land flourish more. This was such a cozy, whimsical, beautiful story. I loved it. This one got 5 stars for me. It is a YA fantasy. The vividness of this story captured my heart, and it was just so unique, and I loved the Korean influences in it. The next mythology retelling comes from Mayan mythology, and it is the only one that I do not own. I borrowed it from my sister-in-law, and that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is an adult fantasy about a young woman named Cassiopeia who has big dreams for herself, but she is stuck as sort of a maid to her grandfather, who is not a really nice man. And one day when she is cleaning his rooms, she discovers this mysterious chest. And when she opens it, she unknowingly releases the Mayan god of death. He makes her come along with him on this journey to collect the different pieces of himself so that he can regenerate and overthrow his brother from the throne. I thought this was a really cool story. I loved the Mayan mythology. I am really into Mayan mythology. I haven't read too many books about it, but I've read a handful, and so I've started getting a better grasp. It has a journey trope. It has lots of action, adventure. It has a very diverse cast. It's also historical fantasy, which is something I enjoy. The next mythology retelling comes from Norse mythology, and that is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. This is an adult fantasy retelling of Angerboda and Loki's relationship. Angerboda, who has been living in solitude after Odin banished her for not giving him information on a prophecy. And she's living there when Loki shows up. Loki, as we know, is the trickster god in Norse mythology. And he ends up in a relationship with Angerboda. They end up having 3 children together who are known as the monsters of Norse mythology. And this was just such a beautiful story. It is a bit of a slower story. It is a bit of a slice of life story, and it's much more centered around Angrboda and her life as a mother to these 3 children, the sacrifices she makes for them, the toxic relationship she is in with Loki, and I absolutely love this. I did listen to it on audiobook, and I loved the narration of it, and I just liked learning about a character within Norse mythology that I didn't know a whole lot about before I read this. The next mythology retelling comes from West African mythology, and that is Raybearer by Jordan Ofueko. This is a story of a young woman named Teresai who has grown up in isolation because her mother, known as the Lady, wants her to kill this certain person that's high up in the hierarchy. She has no idea who this person is, but she's grown up knowing that it's her duty to kill this person. And one day she is sent to the palace to enter into these trials to try and become the Crown Prince's Circle of 11, who will be like this group of people who are meant to protect one another and the kingdom. So when Teresai gets there, she of course is able to accomplish this and become the Circle of 11. And then she meets the Crown Prince and she realizes, this is the person my mother has raised me to kill. And she's starting to have conflicting feelings about that because within this Circle of 11, she is finding the found family that she never had. So she is starting to form relationships with these people, and she is starting to care for these people. So when she pushes back against her mother's wishes, she ends up breaking something that she has to learn how to put back together and survive without her mother's influences. This is such a political fantasy, and I am not somebody who loves political fantasy at all. So for me to enjoy this really blew my mind. It was so well developed. I loved the found family. I loved the characters and just the atmosphere that's in this story. However, I am only going to recommend this first book because the sequel to this was not good in my opinion. So if West African mythology influences are something that you're looking for, definitely check out Raybearer, but maybe just take it as a standalone. The next recommendation has influences of Mesopotamian mythology, which is a super rare mythology that I know nothing about, other than what I Googled when I was reading this book, and that is Slight by Jennifer Somersby, sorry. This is a YA fantasy about a young woman named Genevieve who has grown up in this traveling circus, and her mother is kind of odd. She says things, and she says she sees things, and she says she hears things, and one day when her mother is performing, she falls to her death. And Genevieve doesn't want to admit that once her mother dies, she starts hearing and seeing these things that plagued her mother. And when the circus gets a new owner, she starts to question if maybe this mysterious new owner of the circus has something to do with the things that she and her mother are seeing. And it leads her to discovering some things that are linked to Mesopotamian mythology. I really enjoyed this one for the circus setting. That's one of my favorite settings. When I was reading it, I was like, I wonder if this is actually like a true mythology. So I did some Googling and I found out that yes, the influences that are in this book come from Mesopotamian mythology, which was so freaking cool to me. So that just added a layer to this story that I really enjoyed. I also just loved seeing like the daily life of the circus performers. This has a slight touch of romance at the end, but not very much. I haven't gotten around to reading book 2 yet. My friend Yami read book 2. She said it wasn't as good as this. I do want to give it a try and see what I think, but I really enjoyed this first book for sure. And the last mythology retelling recommendation I have to share with you comes from Egyptian mythology, and that is a YA contemporary called The Descendants of Isis series by Kelsey Ketch. This is the first book, Daughter of Isis. This is about a young woman named Natera who, when her Egyptian mother is killed, she and her father move to this kitschy California town that is very Egyptian themed. And when she gets there, she is the new girl at school, and she catches the eye of this young man named Seth. And Seth is very drawn to her because he is able to sort of manipulate people, and Natera is one of the only people he can't seem to do this with, so he's very drawn to her. Unbeknownst to Natty, Seth is part of this group called the Sons of Set, who is this group of people who worships the Egyptian god of chaos, Set. They are very much a cult. She discovers that she is in fact a daughter of Isis who is meant to protect the name of Ra. And in finding this out, she and Seth end up forming this very toxic relationship. And it's also a bit of a forbidden relationship because he is not supposed to fall in love. That is like one of the key doctrines of his cult, is not to fall in love. And he ends up doing so with Natty. And in doing so, he ends up breaking his bond with this cult to help her escape and stay safe. This is a dark YA contemporary. There is a lot of content in here about sexual assault, mental manipulation, physical abuse, mental abuse. So keep that in mind if that sounds like anything you're interested in. Just know that it involves a cult and they do human sacrifices, and it's a lot for a YA contemporary, but it is so good. It is one of my favorite YA series. It's also one of my favorite stories that I've ever read that has Egyptian influences in it. It is a 3-book series and it's a doozy. So if you're interested in Egyptian mythology, this deals with the myth of Isis, Set, the name of Ra, all of that. You should definitely check this series out. Those are some non-Greek mythology / folklore retellings I think you should check out. Let me know down in the comments if any of these interest you, if you've read any of them, what your thoughts were. And if you are still here, could you leave me the spider emoji? Because in West African mythology, Anansi is the spider and he is a trickster god. And until my next video, read a non-Greek mythology for me. Bye!